My fellow Americans, tonight I want to talk to you about a question that has weighed heavy on the minds of many. What will happen if Donald Trump kicks out? Now, I don't mean just kicking out individuals from this nation, hardworking immigrants, dreamers, families who built their lives here. I also mean what happens when leadership kicks out compassion. What happens when we push away decency? What happens when we choose fear over hope? Because make no mistake, when leaders kick out people simply because of where they come from, the language they speak, or the color of their skin, they are not only kicking them out of America, they are kicking out the very idea of America. See, America is not defined by exclusion. America is defined by inclusion. Our greatness has always come from the fact that we welcome strivers and seekers. We take in the tired and the poor. We make room for the next generation who believes that through hard work, they too can write their chapter in this grand story. If we allow Donald Trump or any leader to kick out those who contribute to our communities, then we all lose. We lose doctors and teachers. We lose small business owners and farm workers. We lose the innovators who might discover the next vaccine, the soldiers who might defend our freedoms, the children who might dream bigger than we ever did. But here's the truth: history has shown us that fear never lasts. Division never wins in the long run. Because the American people are better than that. We are stronger when we stand together. So, the question is not just what will happen if Donald Trump kicks out. The question is what will happen if we stand up, if we lift our voices, if we show our children that love is stronger than hate, that unity is stronger than division, that democracy is stronger than any demagogue. That's the America I believe in. That's the America I know you believe in too. And if we fight for it, if we choose hope over fear, if we keep our doors and our hearts open, then no matter who tries to kick out, the spirit of America will always invite in. Thank you. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America. When we talk about the phrase, what will happen if Donald Trump kicks out, it is easy to think only in terms of immigration policy or deportations. And yes, that is part of the conversation. But to leave it there would be to miss the deeper consequences, the broader moral challenge at stake. Because the act of kicking out is not just about borders or paperwork. It is about values. It is about who we are and who we choose to be as a nation. You see, every decision a leader makes reflects not only policy but principle. If the guiding principle is exclusion, then it spreads like ripples across the water. It starts with immigrants, but it doesn't end there. If we tolerate a politics that kicks out people based on their birthplace, pretty soon we accept the idea that others can be kicked out too. Those who think differently, those who worship differently, those who love differently. Exclusion breeds more exclusion. Once compassion is diminished in one corner of our society, it is weakened everywhere. That's why the framing of this issue is so important. We cannot afford to reduce it to a technical matter of visas, walls, or quotas. We have to understand it as a test of our national character. America's story has never been about shutting doors. It has been about opening them. From the ships that carried Irish immigrants fleeing famine, to the trains that carried African Americans north in search of opportunity, to the planes that today carry refugees fleeing war and persecution. The strength of this country has always been found in its embrace, not in its rejection. So when we ask, what will happen if Donald Trump kicks out? We are really asking what happens to the idea of America. Because the truth is, our nation is not defined by ethnicity or bloodline or even geography. It is defined by a promise that all people are created equal and that anyone willing to contribute, anyone willing to work, anyone willing to dream, has a place here. If we let go of that promise, if we allow fear to dictate who belongs, then we are not just turning people away at the border. We are turning away from ourselves. Now, some may say, it's just about enforcing the law. And yes, laws matter, but laws are only as just as the values that shape them. Our Constitution, our Declaration, our founding documents, they were written not just as rules, but as ideals, ideals that bend the arc of our country toward fairness and inclusion. When leadership strips those ideals away, when leadership reduces the nation to a fortress instead of a beacon, then the loss is not just for immigrants. It is a loss for every citizen. That's why we must frame this conversation not in narrow terms, but in expansive ones. This isn't only about who gets to stay. It's about what we choose to stand for. Do we stand for fear or for hope? Do we build walls or do we build bridges? That is the broader issue. That is the real choice before us. At the heart of this debate lies a moral contrast that is as old as our republic: fear versus hope, exclusion versus inclusion. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment when it had to choose between shrinking back in fear or stepping forward with courage. And the story of America, at its best, has always been that we chose hope. Now, fear is a powerful force. It's easy to spread. It plays on our instincts to protect what we know. Fear tells us that newcomers are a threat, that difference is dangerous, that by shutting others out we somehow keep ourselves safe. And when fear becomes the foundation of leadership, it takes on many forms: anger, resentment, scapegoating. It tells citizens that their struggles are the fault of some other. It convinces us that the solution to our problems is to simply push people away. But history shows us something else: a fear may win in the short term, but it never leads to greatness. Think back to the dark chapters of our past. When we excluded Chinese immigrants in the 19th century, we robbed ourselves of labor, of culture, of creativity. When we interned Japanese Americans during World War II, we betrayed our own principles of justice. When African Americans were denied basic rights under Jim Crow, we diminished our democracy and delayed our progress. Fear has always left us smaller, weaker, and divided. Hope, on the other hand, expands us. Hope asks us to look not at what divides us, but at what we can build together. Hope acknowledges challenges, but it sees in every person the possibility of contribution. When we choose hope, we welcome the idea that tomorrow can be better than today, and that people from every background can help us get there. That's why this contrast matters. When a leader chooses exclusion, when they kick out, they are not just making a political decision. They are choosing fear as the guiding light. And that choice ripples across our communities, teaching people that suspicion is safer than solidarity, that distrust is wiser than compassion. But when we choose inclusion, when we say that immigrants, dreamers, and refugees belong in the American story, we are not just helping them. We are helping ourselves, because inclusion strengthens the bonds of trust. It makes our economy more dynamic, our culture more vibrant, and our democracy more resilient. The moral contrast, then, is not abstract. It is lived every day. It shows up in whether a child grows up believing their family belongs. It shows up in whether a worker feels valued or discarded. It shows up in whether our nation lives up to its promise of equality or retreats into the shadows of fear. So the choice before us is clear. We can accept fear as the architect of our future, or we can embrace hope as the builder of our destiny. And if we are true to the best of America's ideals, we know which side of that contrast we must choose. If we want to truly understand what's at stake when leaders talk about kicking out, we have to come back to a simple but profound truth. America's identity has always been built not on exclusion, but on inclusion. Unlike many nations whose identity is tied to a single culture, language, or ancestry, the United States was founded on an idea, an audacious, radical idea for its time, that people from every corner of the world could come here, pursue their dreams, and be part of something greater than themselves. Think about that for a moment. Our identity doesn't come from the soil under our feet or the bloodlines of our families. It comes from a shared belief. It comes from a promise that no matter where you were born, no matter what language you speak, no matter what faith you practice, if you believe in liberty and equality, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and contribute, then you have a claim to being an American. Now, there have always been forces pushing against this ideal. Every wave of immigration has faced suspicion. The Irish were once told they didn't belong. Italians were considered outsiders. Jewish immigrants fleeing persecution were turned away at our shores. And yet, generation after generation, those very groups became part of the fabric of America. They built our cities, fueled our industries, enriched our culture, and served in our armed forces. What was once feared became part of who we are. That's the cycle of America. Each new group, at first met with doubt, eventually proves that they too can carry the American dream forward. And so the story continues with Latinos, with Asians, with Africans, with Middle Easterners, with immigrants and refugees from all walks of life. The question is whether we will honor that tradition or abandon it. Because if we start defining America by who we exclude rather than who we welcome, we risk losing the very essence of this country. We risk becoming just another place on the map rather than the shining example of possibility that people across the world have looked to for generations. What makes America strong is not homogeneity, but diversity. It's not about keeping people out, but about drawing people in. We've proven time and again that when we embrace difference, we find new strength. Our music, our cuisine, our technology, our art, it all blossoms from the mix of cultures and perspectives that converge here. So when a leader says, kick them out, what they're really saying is, strip America of its identity. They are telling us to betray the story that has always defined us. And that's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Because a country that forgets who it is can never reach its full potential. If we believe in the promise of America, then we must defend its core identity, a place where doors are open, where opportunity is real, and where everyone has a chance to belong. When we talk about kicking people out, it's easy for some to treat it like numbers on a page, statistics, policies, percentages. But behind every number is a name, a face, a story. And when you push people out, you don't just move them across a border. You tear apart families, you disrupt communities, you rob the nation of the gifts they bring. Think about the immigrant mother who works 2 jobs so her children can go to school. Think about the father who came here fleeing violence, who now runs a small business that employs half a dozen people in his town. Think about the student who dreams of becoming a doctor, the soldier who puts on a uniform to defend the very country that debates his right to stay. When we kick out, we don't just lose them. We lose the teachers who inspire our kids, the engineers who design our future, the caregivers who watch over our elderly. It's not just an economic loss. Though the economic cost is real, it's a moral loss. Because America has always been strongest when we saw the humanity in one another. When we understood that each person, no matter their accent or background, carries within them potential. To close the door on them is to close the door on our own future. The cost shows up in more subtle ways too. A child who grows up fearing their parents might be deported learns to live in constant anxiety. A community that sees its neighbors torn away learns mistrust. A workplace missing its employees loses not just productivity, but the spirit of teamwork. Piece by piece, exclusion erodes the bonds that tie us together. So the question is not only what we lose if immigrants are forced out, it's what kind of people we become if we allow it. Do we become a nation defined by suspicion or one defined by generosity? Do we measure our strength by how many we keep out or by how many we lift up? That's the human cost of exclusion, and it's one we cannot afford. If you look through the long arc of American history, one truth stands out: fear and division never last. Time and again, our country has faced waves of fear-driven politics. And time and again, the tide of inclusion has proven stronger. In the 19th century, nativist movements tried to paint Irish and German immigrants as threats. They said these newcomers would destroy the American way of life. Instead, their descendants became mayors, teachers, business leaders, and patriots who shaped this nation. In the early 20th century, people said Southern and Eastern Europeans couldn't be trusted. Yet they helped build our industries, fought in our wars, and contributed to our culture. During World War II, suspicion led us to intern Japanese Americans, one of the most shameful episodes in our history. But decades later, we recognized that wrong, apologized, and recommitted to our values. The lesson is clear: fear may hold sway for a season, but it never defines the destiny of America. Because deep down, Americans know we are at our best when we expand the circle of belonging. Every generation faces a test. In the 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement reminded us that separate but equal was not just. In the 1980s, leaders across the aisle came together to pass immigration reform that gave millions a chance to live without fear. Today, we face a new test. The language may be harsher, the rhetoric louder, but the choice is the same: exclusion or inclusion, fear or hope. History tells us that choosing fear delays progress, but never stops it. Choosing hope moves us forward, and the arc of America always bends toward justice if we do our part to push it. Now here's the thing, the future of this country is not determined by one man, not by Donald Trump, not by any single president. The future of America has always been determined by its people, by you. When leaders try to kick out, it's easy to feel powerless, to think the decisions are made far above our heads. But history shows us something different. When citizens raise their voices, when they organize, when they vote, they change the course of this nation. Think of the women who marched for suffrage. Think of the workers who fought for fair wages and safe conditions. Think of the students who sat at lunch counters demanding dignity. These were ordinary citizens, not presidents or senators, who shifted the tide of history. They proved that in America, power ultimately rests with the people. So when we ask, what will happen if Donald Trump kicks out? The more important question is, what will happen if we stand up? What will happen if communities refuse to turn on one another? What will happen if young people show up at the ballot box, determined to defend the ideals of fairness and equality? What will happen if neighbors choose compassion over suspicion? The truth is, leaders can try to divide us, but if citizens refuse to be divided, unity wins. Leaders can try to spread fear, but if citizens insist on hope, hope prevails. That's the power you hold. And it's a power no leader can ever take away unless we give it up. At the end of the day, this is not a story of despair. It is a story of possibility, because while fear shouts loudly, hope speaks deeper. And I know, that the American people are guided by hope. Hope is what drives a parent to cross an ocean so their child can have a better future. Hope is what pushes a student to stay up late studying, believing their hard work will pay off. Hope is what leads a community to rebuild after tragedy, knowing tomorrow can be brighter. Leaders may try to tell us that hope is non-avis, that fear is more realistic. But history proves otherwise. Everything we cherish today, from civil rights to women's rights, from technological breakthroughs to space exploration, was once dismissed as unrealistic. It was hope, not fear, that carried us forward. So the task before us is to keep that flame alive, to remind ourselves and each other that hope is not weakness. Hope is strength. It takes courage to see possibility where others see only problems. It takes vision to welcome difference when others only want to close doors. That's why when we hear talk of kicking people out, our response must be to invite in. When we hear voices of division, our response must be unity. When we hear despair, our response must be hope, because that is the American way. So here's where we end. Not with fear, not with anger, but with a call to action. Because speeches don't change the world. People do. You do. The question is not just what will happen if Donald Trump kicks out. The question is, what will we do about it? Will we stay silent, or will we speak? Will we look away, or will we stand with our neighbors? Will we accept exclusion as normal? Or will we fight for inclusion as the American standard? This is our test. And how we answer will define not just the fate of immigrants, but the soul of our nation. So let us choose unity over division. Let us choose courage over fear. Let us choose to believe not just in America as it is, but in America as it can be. That shining city on a hill, that beacon of possibility, that place where everyone has a fair shot. If we lift our voices, if we come together, if we refuse to let fear define us, then no matter who sits in the White House, the spirit of America will endure. Stronger, brighter, more just, that's the call, that's the choice. And I believe with all my heart that if we rise to meet it, then generations from now, our children and grandchildren will say that in this moment, we chose hope. We chose inclusion. We chose America. My friends, as we leave tonight, remember this, the story of America has never been written by fear. It has always been written by people who chose hope, who chose to stand together, who chose to keep the doors of opportunity open. The challenges before us are real, but so is our power to meet them. So let's walk forward with courage, with compassion, and with confidence in one another. If we do, then no matter the obstacles, the promise of America will endure. Thank you, God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.